You know, for years, there's been this one huge question at the very heart of therapy for kids with cerebral palsy. It's created a ton of uncertainty for families, for doctors, for everyone involved. But now, we finally have a clear answer, and we're going to break down all the evidence right here.
So, what's the big debate? It really boils down to this. When we talk about strength training for kids with CP, does building up their muscles actually help them move better? Or could it possibly backfire and make things even harder for them?
So, you might be wondering, why was this even a question in the first place? Well, to really get it, we need to dive into the core challenge of what's called spastic cerebral palsy.
On the surface, you'd think the solution would be pretty obvious. If a child's muscles are weak, you strengthen them, right? But for decades, it just wasn't that simple. There was a big catch.
It was this constant tug of war. On one hand, you had this incredible hope that stronger muscles could lead to better walking, better balance, more independence. But on the other side, there was this very real nagging fear. What if the exercises actually make the spasticity worse? You know, that muscle stiffness that already makes movement so tough. And for the longest time, different studies came to different conclusions, which just left everybody guessing.
Okay, so with all this confusion and conflicting data, how do you get a real, solid answer? Well, researchers knew they needed a much more powerful way to look at the problem. They needed to do what you could call the ultimate evidence review. And they did that with something called a systematic review and meta-analysis. Now that sounds complicated, but think of it as a super study. Instead of just doing one more experiment, this method gathers up all the best, highest quality studies out there, pulls all their data together, and analyzes it to find the one, big picture, most reliable answer possible.
So just how big was this super study? Well, the researchers meticulously analyzed 27 different, high-quality randomized controlled trials. That's a lot of research.
And get this. Those 27 studies included data from a whopping 847 children and adolescents with spastic CP. That scale is what gives the final conclusions so much power and reliability.
And let me tell you, the process to pick these studies was no joke. As you can see here, they started with hundreds and hundreds of potential papers. Then they went through this super rigorous filtering process, tossing out anything that wasn't up to the highest scientific standard. This is so important because it ensures the final verdict is based only on the absolute strongest evidence we have.
All right, so this brings us to the moment of truth. After all of that incredibly detailed work, after combining all that data, what was the final verdict on strength training?
The results? I mean, they were crystal clear and overwhelmingly positive. This super study confirmed that strength training delivers real, measurable benefits. And we're not just talking about getting stronger muscles. We're talking significant improvements in balance, kids being able to walk faster, and better overall gross motor skills, things like running and jumping.
Okay, this is all fantastic news. It's what everyone was hoping for. But it still leaves that one massive elephant in the room, the question that started this whole debate in the first place.
The big fear: does all of this benefit of getting stronger come at a cost? Does it make that muscle stiffness, that spasticity, worse?
And the answer, from the highest level of scientific evidence we have, is a powerful, definitive, simple no. And don't just take my word for it. Let's look at the direct quote from the researchers themselves. All studies demonstrated that strength training did not change or have adverse effects on spasticity. It just doesn't get any clearer than that. That long-standing fear was officially busted by the best evidence available.
Now, I know a chart like this can look a little intimidating, but the takeaway is actually really simple. Each of those little lines represents a single study, but the most important part is that diamond shape at the very bottom. That represents the combined result of all the studies put together. And because it lands firmly to the right, on the positive side, it's basically a picture of the final verdict, a clear, definite, positive effect.
Okay, so the science is solid. The verdict is in. But what does this actually mean in the real world? For therapists, for parents, and most importantly, for the kids themselves. How do we put all this knowledge into practice?
So let's break down the key messages here. Number one, it works, period. It leads to real gains in strength, balance, and how kids walk. 2, it is safe. It does all this without that feared increase in spasticity. 3, it helps kids actually do more things. And 4, the researchers were also honest that we still need to learn more about how these physical improvements really translate to participation in everyday life.
And if you're wondering, okay, so what did a typical program that got these great results actually look like? Well, generally speaking, We're talking about programs that lasted anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. Kids would train about 2 to 5 times a week, and each of those sessions would be somewhere between 20 and 60 minutes long.
So this research is just a massive step forward. It gives a clear, evidence-based green light for something that was debated for so long. But, science never really stops. So what's next on the horizon?
The researchers were really upfront about what we still need to figure out. We need to look at the long-term effects of this training. We need more research focused on strengthening arms and hands, not just legs. And we need to better understand how this all applies to kids with the most severe movement challenges. And, like we mentioned, there's that big question about how these physical gains really boost a child's ability to participate in school, with friends, and in their community.
So if there is one thing, one crucial point you walk away with today, it has to be this: the debate is over. The highest level of evidence we have confirms that strength training isn't something to be afraid of. It is a safe, effective, and absolutely essential part of a complete therapy program for kids with spastic cerebral palsy.
And that leaves us with one final and really important thought. Now that the evidence is so clear, the challenge isn't about if we should be doing this anymore. The question now is how. How can we make sure that every single child who could benefit from strength training gets access to the right kind of program to help them unlock their absolute full potential?